Morning. Good morning. My name is Tracy Lawrence. I'm the hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Maribel is our clerk for today's hearing. It is Wednesday, February 26, 2025. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available after through a link located on the San Francisco Public Works website at sfpublicworks.org. Since this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet. Therefore, if you would like to receive results of the hearing, please send an email to the address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider, and before I talk about the consideration items, I do want to make note that hearing order 211431 has been canceled. So we will not be hearing any information on this one here. Okay. So this public hearing is being held to consider two orders. Hearing order number 211422 to consider the denial of shared spaces parklet application 22PK2-00218, denial of request to occupy public right-of-way with a parklet at 562 Green Street. And we're also considering the denial of shared spaces application 23PK2-00251, denial of request to occupy public right-of-way with a parklet at 522 Green Street. My job as a hearing officer is to gather the facts from the hearing items, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make a determination. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you if you have provided your contact information. Before we start, is there anyone here who would like to address an item that is not on the agenda today? Okay, if there are no comments or remarks from the public, we will move forward. The hearing will proceed as follows. 1, I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. 2, I will allow the applicant to speak, followed by any members of the public or witness who wishes to speak. After the department, if the department would like to address any comments or concerns. Last, the applicant again, if the person has any rebuttal. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Our clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let us know before you speak. Then you will have the standard 3 minutes. If you are a member of the public, wait for me to call for public comments, then use Zoom's raise your hand feature. If you are on a computer, put yourself in the queue to speak. If you're dialing in, use *9 and we'll recognize you. If you are on mute, press A. Second bell will signal that the time is up. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. As I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask a question. After all comments are complete, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing, and I'd like to call on Gregory.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, one moment here. And can you see my slideshow adequately now?
Yes.
I can, yes.
Yes.
All right. So for today's hearing, I have 2 orders and I have 2 applications that I am presenting in tandem. They're adjacent sites, and the request for occupancy on the public in the public right of way to date has been cooperative to effect, and that is why we are presenting one presentation. And let's get going. Some background. Pandemic Pandemic era shared spaces permits allowed businesses to install structures without validating compliance via self-certification. Essentially, click here if you followed all the rules. Someone clicks here, we were able to issue them a temporary pandemic permit. And I say temporary and I say pandemic, which is to say that the program was governed through emergency orders and public works orders and not any type of code or ordinance. Legislation was adopted to allow this program to run in perpetuity, and a grace period was legislated that allowed these pandemic era structures to occupy public right-of-way until September 27th, 2023. And that deadline was extended once or twice. So what that means is, as of September 27th, 2023, if you have a pandemic era structure, it needs to be removed, and if you'd like to retain outdoor seating, you need to complete the permit application process for a permanent permit. So we allowed businesses to retain pandemic structures when they were demonstrating progress or effort in completing their application. What we were trying to do is bridge the gap for these businesses in supporting outdoor seating as they transition from one program to another. Businesses, with very rare exception, had to modify existing structures or rebuild them to gain compliance. Modifications could be small in nature, and sometimes they were dramatic or larger. If a business has an unpermitted non-compliant structure, i.e. a pandemic parklet, it creates risk and liability for the city, which is to say that the structure doesn't meet current rules and regulations. It's not actively permitted, and as such, the insurance coverage and risk management is an issue therein. And then for some demonstration, in the last 2 weeks, we've had at least 3 parklet collisions with automobiles that we're aware of. So if we were talking, is this a theoretical concern or realized, I would say it's realized. Green Street's a busy commercial segment. To date, we've received 8 requests for parklets on this street. In order to accommodate the volume and density of requests in light of San Francisco first responder needs, businesses on this block sought to collaborate and cooperate as it related to the use of public right-of-way for shared obligations. So we require 3-foot setbacks on the end of each parklet for first responder access. And when 2 businesses were adjacent to one another on Green Street, instead of requiring each of those businesses to provide their own individual 3-foot buffer, therefore creating 6 feet of space, we worked with them to allow each business to provide 18 inches for that space and share the 36-inch gap. And that's meaningful to the business because it means that they're allowed to have more square footage for seating. And we did on-site visits. I would say that our consideration was unprecedented in the amount that fire went on site. I can't think immediately of another example where we allowed for some collaborative cooperation, which isn't to say we wouldn't, but that's the only thing circumstantial here. And this arrangement was with the blessing of San Francisco Fire. Some more background. The arrangement with fire, as it was related to setback obligations, was reached in late July of last year. And we also said that in light of this arrangement, it doesn't absolve you of any of your permit application requirements or lower the bar. It's just a flexibility that we are able to provide the business and also meet the needs of first responders. Public Works staff and the MTA have requested application materials repeatedly, be it updated site plans or consent letters for when a business needs to utilize more than 50% of a parking space that may not entirely affront their business. So the parking spaces and the storefronts are not aligned, and MTA does not like to squander curb space. So they don't like to grant someone 1/3 of a parking space because it essentially renders the remainder useless. And so they're very fastidious as to how they place these and what consent you get. Columbus Cafe began the application process for this legislated parklet in August of 2022 and Sotomare in December of 2022, which gives you some perspective as to how ongoing this has been. And this is just a capture from Google Street View cited in December 2024. And one point of emphasis I'd like to make is that these structures that we're looking at are non-compliant, and they're non-compliant for meaningful reasons. So one thing I want to emphasize is that if it were just a matter of creating forms and paperwork or doing some paper pushing, we would seek to be as lenient as possible. But because there are physical effects in the public right of way with physical characteristics that are non-compliant, it's a little bit of a different situation. So we require a 3-foot gap every 20 feet and also at the end of parklets. And the reason that we require that gap is so that first responders, if they were to pull up adjacent to these parklets, would be able to leave the roadway from their truck or ambulance and get through the parklet to either enter the restaurant to get to someone or also to ladder. Additionally meaningful when you look in this photo is that these are multi-story structures with residents above. So the 3-foot gap is particularly important, which is to say, if this was a 1-foot structure, or pardon me, a 1-story structure, where are you putting the ladder to? Who do you need to get to? The way that these structures are currently out there in the public right of way, there's no way that they would be able to put a ladder on that building and get to tenants above there. And there's no way that they would be able to park in the roadway and walk into the restaurant. Additionally, you may see at the end of the one structure, a bench has been placed in the 3-foot setback, which subverts the use and the requirement. The whole purpose of that 3-foot setback, which looks like it's the space between the structure and those soft hit posts, is so that a first responder could either place their ladder in that gap or so that they could enter the restaurant or sidewalk from that gap. A bench has been placed there, so we see very limited to no first responder access for most of this block. This is the site overall. Now speaking specifically to Columbus Cafe, they haven't had an active permit since May 31st, 2023, which is to say the pandemic permit they had expired, that program exhausted. It appears that they began the process for their permit application over 2 years ago. For some sense of context and scale, to date, we have admitted nearly 300 businesses into our legislated program. We are requesting updated site plans and completed certification forms for them. The pre-existing parklet is non-compliant due to it's not built within the designated marked parking space. So as I mentioned before, curb space for MTA, they don't want to leave 1/3 of a parking space left. It's not particularly useful to anyone. And the way that this parklet's aligned, it's not within the confines of a parking space. So it's wasting curb space to that effect. And there's an obstruction in the emergency access gap, which is, I mentioned before, the use criteria for that, and there's no setbacks. So again, if there was a fire on site, if there was a fire in any of the residential units above this business, it would be very challenging to reach them. We've requested materials repeatedly, and the applicant has changed the scope of occupancy, whether they need to encroach on an adjacent spot or whether they can stay within space within their own frontage. And that informs certain requirements, because when you shift in front of a neighbor and you're occupying 50% or more of the parking space, you need their permission to be there. At this point in time, in the absence of a legislated permit, the structure needs to be removed. So as I mentioned, we allowed folks to keep these as a bridge. And the notion was that they would be active and apply themselves in pursuing this permit. We haven't gotten that traction here. The pre-existing structure, again, doesn't align with curb spaces, first responder. Okay. hit all those points. And then these are some photos that we had, and I apologize that you can see it's two separate photos that are seeking to demonstrate that structure. You'll notice on the left there's scissor gates. I don't know if that's a gap, but it's going to be very challenging, and you can see that there's a gap within the structure. Looks like there's a little doorway there, but as you'll notice above it, that gap needs to be continuous above the parklet because there's absolutely no way fire would be able to ladder the building that this parklet is in front of because that gap doesn't go all the way up. They couldn't drop a ladder in that, 8 or 10 foot clearance, whatever's there. Their neighbor Sotomare has participated in the pandemic program as well, and their permit expired in the same batch because that program ended. And again, they started their application process in 2022. We need an updated site plan and consent letter for adjacent property. I had a conversation directly with the applicant on December 13th, and they assured me that on the 16th, we would have that consent letter, and they gave me an emphatic declaration that they would have it dealt with that Monday. And to date, that letter has not been provided to us. The pre-existing parklet is non-compliant because again, it's off the parking spaces. There's no gaps for access and there's no setbacks. Not unlike the neighbor, we've requested materials repeatedly and the applicant has changed the scope of occupancy. More or less the same issues. And then there's a photo here. It's also worth noting that we require these parklets to have I think it's 43 inches. We clip the height on, and that's so that first responders can see from the street through the sidewalk to the building. They've placed advertising on this parklet, and it's completely obstructed. So if something were happening on the other side, or if the first responder was trying to get through, they wouldn't be able to see, and they physically wouldn't be able to enter the space. And that would be inadmissible. So there's no gaps, and then what little visual continuity they have, they've obstructed with banners here. I don't know if those are still up. These are from 2023. And then additionally, this is a photo I have of the remaining sidewalk space that's left there. The general rule of thumb is that fire does not allow roofs on sidewalks that are 10 feet, that are more narrow than 10 feet. And the reason they don't allow roofs is because they need to be able to ladder. So the building. So right now we're in a situation where they can't access from the street because there's no emergency gaps. And if they tried to run around and ladder from the sidewalk, there's not adequate sidewalk space to ladder that building. So it would be exceedingly challenging for them to reach folks. And then in closing, this is just another photo of the street segment. The applicant or a designer on their behalf has submitted a chronology that I had provided and that I saved in the case file, and it indicates that there are, I think, 5 and 6 corresponding revisions for site plans. And this designer is an architect. For some sense of scale and comparison, we have been able to approve of those nearly 300 approvals. Many folks, meaning restaurant operators, have done their site plans by themselves without the assistance of a design professional. And many, if not most of those folks have been able to get a permit with 2 to 3 revisions of site plans. And 5 and 6 at that point, it demonstrates some scale of effort here. We're asking that you uphold this denial so that we may direct these businesses to remove the parklets, likely in a 72-hour window. If these businesses are compelled or want to spend 2 to 3 years on their permit application, We don't necessarily begrudge them, but the challenge is that there are remaining effects in the public right of way that pose serious challenges to public health and safety, which has compelled us to deny this application, given the elongated and complicated process that we have seen in the permit application. If you have any questions, I'm happy, but that is my presentation.
Thanks, Greg. And so you're saying that if they were to start this process, it would take 2 to 3 years?
Not at all. I'm saying that they have taken 2 to 3 years to
Oh, got it.
date.
Hmm.
And if it was just a matter of forms and applications that they weren't satisfactorily submitting, it would be less of a challenge to public health and safety. But because we kind of allowed them to leave these materials out while they pursue their application, it's become problematic to this point.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Gregory. Maribel, do we have someone from Columbus Cafe or Sotomayor?
Well, we do have appellants. If you would like them to speak, you can. We have, I believe, representing. There's Mr. Emerlin, Mr. Rich Azino, Azolino, and there's a Mr. DeVault. So
Okay, so I will call the first representative for Sotomayor, 552 Green Street, to speak.
Mr. Azolino, are you representing the 562?
I'm sorry, Maribel. I'm sorry.
Oh,
First, I want to call for public comment. So are there any
absolutely.
comments from the public that wishes to speak?
I do not see any other hand up except for Mr. Zolino, and I believe he's one of the appellants.
Okay. Okay. So then we'll go ahead and move forward, and then I'll let him speak.
Mr. Azolino, you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't figure this out. Sorry about that. Thank you, Gregory, for your dissertation there. I agree with a lot what he says. I'm not going to disagree with what he says to a certain extent. That we put the parklets up. We were one of the first ones to put the parklets up when Aaron Peskin got it passed. He asked us to put them up right away. They are what got us over the hump to stay in business, and they continue to keep us in business. They allow us to continue to keep my staff and their families fed. We have not lost any of my staff because of the parklets that allowed us to get the extra business in there to keep them working. I'd love to keep them working. We do need the parklets in order to do that. We have agreed on many things, and some of the what occurred, as Gregory says, a time lapse in there, and I agree with them. He's asked for paperwork. The store, I signed my paperwork. Will signed his. We were waiting for the California Fish Market to sign theirs. They told us at point blank that they would cooperate and sign it, and they have hence not kept their word. A couple things have happened to them, and one is that one of the major owners of the California fish market passed away in early January, and that put a stop on everything. The business has been closed since, and they're difficult to get a hold of. I spoke to the manager of them, and he says he cannot sign. There are now current lawsuits amongst themselves within a trust and within the business. So I don't know what's going to occur there. That's not my call. That's not my forte. But they're the ones that limited us to sign it. We were trying to get that one dock to make it convenient, as Gregory did say. San Francisco Fire Department gave us a
Second,
blessing.
thank you. Keep going. You can keep going. You have 30 seconds left.
Oh, gosh. Um, um, did comply with that. Let me just say in 30 seconds, we want to keep them. We want to comply. I think Elmer that's here will show you, we have most of the map work in. Whatever Gregory and his department tell us we need to do in light of what we can't do with the California fish market. My contractor's ready to go. I wanted this done last year. So did Will. And I wanted it to be done before the spring comes too. So if
Thank
any
you.
other information you need, please ask.
And Maribel Azzolino is with Sotomayor or Columbus Cafe.
I believe he is with Sotomayor.
Okay. Okay. So my question,
I'm sorry, Officer Lawrence, one moment. Let me get some clarification.
okay, he's with Sotomayor. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Let me get some clarification. Mr. Azzolino, are you with Sotomayor or with Columbus Cafe?
He's with Sotomayor. Someone put it in the
Oh,
comment.
okay.
Beach Enterprises, DBA, Sotomayor Osteria and Seafood Restaurant.
Thank you.
Okay. So my question then that I want to have, and I will ask Greg this question. Greg, were you aware of these updates, or how is it that this California Fish Market held up their responsibility to receive these documents? Should any of this have been communicated? Was any of this communicated to you?
California Fish Market's relativity to this permit application is elective, which is to say that their participation is predicated on the space that the businesses requested and the encroachment therein. Another way of putting it is someone's top priority was to just get in a parklet with the space they had and a path of minimal resistance. They wouldn't necessarily need to solicit their neighbor's consent. But what would be consequential about that is that they would have less space to occupy. So the reason that it's taken long is because they wanted that space. And then additionally, California Fish Market is going through their own process for this permit application, and they've completed it to the extent that they've received conditional approval, but they're unable to construct a new parklet and make their changes without Sotomayor finishing their process. So not only is it an issue with public safety and the obstruction with the seating, it's taken 2 to 3 years and twice as many revisions as the average application, but they also are holding up their neighbor from completing the process as well to that effect. We have some reason to believe, which is to say we've been informed by California Fish Market that they were not compelled to offer consent. But I don't have that in writing, and then alternately, I don't have the inverse of that, which is a consent form. The consent forms that we utilize for this program are a template that we provide to businesses. It's a universal consent form that we use for everyone that needs it. And hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And so I have a question for Azzolino. Hello, are you there?
Says, you hear me now?
I do. So my question to you is, were you aware that California Fish Market was pursuing their own permit and going through the process?
Yes. And but at that same time, because the parking spaces that the city says they're 18 feet, the ones on our block are 21 feet, 22 feet. They are not regular. And that's why we were asking for help. We constructed our parklets based on our business boundaries. And that's why we're overlapping to each other. And that's why we asked to do this. And we were granted from the fire department how to do this to go around the side, because what Gregory didn't mention is that Jasper Alley there is the whole side of the building that's completely accessible by the fire department at any time. There are no obstructions and back entrances.
Okay, thank you. Gregory, would you like to?
I'm sorry, what were you asking me?
I'm sorry, did you want to comment on that?
I would just say that there's, as sites go and as special considerations go, there's nothing exceptional about this segment, which is to say this. And if you were like, what constitutes an exceptional site? It might be something like a very, very steep grade, that requires us to have like additional consideration or to run it through engineers. This site's a very flat street. And spatially, there's nothing about it that raises an eyebrow in reviewing. Whereas some other requests we've gotten in, say, like Potrero Hill area, you look at and you're like, oh, that's a tough nut to crack. This is a relatively straightforward block to that effect. The issue is that the amount of space they want to use is predicated on cooperation, and that hasn't been fully realized. Again, if they want a parklet, there's nothing that would prevent them from having one in the future, applying and complying with all the rules and regulations as they stated they intend to. The biggest issue at hand is that when you see that photograph, first responders aren't able to do their job as they need to on that block.
Okay, and then my last question to Ozolino is that clearly California Fish Market was able to move forward with their request for their parklet. And my question is, why is it that you didn't move forward with your process once you learned that they were not going to cooperate?
We were trying to move forward. Then at that point there, we got the denial letter. And that's why we're here in front of you to ask that we can go forward and make all the changes that are necessary to cooperate with all three of us. That's what we're trying to do. As many plans if they're there, I think Elmer's going to speak. We have the plans in there that show the spaces. All we need to do is get now that we cannot do what we were asking to do and that the fire department was given a blessing to do. We want to go forward based on the 3-foot margin that we need to do and get it done as soon as possible. We were ready to move forward.
And then when did you learn that this about California Fish Market?
Within the last couple of weeks, when I tried to get a hold of the gentleman that is in charge of there, his name is Francisco. First, he was on vacation in Italy, and then the death of the death of his partner. And I had a couple of sit downs with them. Says, "Oh, show me some pictures. I can't talk to you now," because he was in the midst of opening North Beach restaurant, and his time was very limited. And I did everything I could to consider all that to get this done. And they finally just told us, "Oh no, I don't think I can't sign it." And the reason for not being able to sign it was because of some lawsuits, and it's not that I'm not privy to, and I don't want to speak of it, but I can understand it. And that's why we're ready to move forward, Will and I, and just to get what we need to get done and make the space that they need so they can finish theirs and go on that street. That street needs us. It makes it a European street. As far as we're concerned, we were voted one of the best parklets the way it was built. We have minimal changes to ours to comply, get rid of the banners, shorten down the windows. Our height limits, everything that's there is acceptable. That we've done early on. Electrically, it's all in place. But again, we need to remove the denial and get a blessing to go forward, and hopefully to work with Gregory and his staff so we can get this done rather rapidly. As I said, my contractor's standing by with the hammer and nail in hand. And in the meantime, I have to say that without excuses, that my wife and I were sick for the last 2 months. Both had pneumonia with all that good stuff that's going around. We finally feel good and we're ready to rock and roll here. So hopefully Gregory can help with us, and you can enlighten and allow us to go forward to make this a better city. I'm born and raised in North Beach, been there for 72 years. Oh, excuse me, 73. My birthday was yesterday. I'm
Mhm.
73 young. And we're not going anywhere. We're building this for my family, my children to go on in the future. We are one of the busiest places in North Beach. We bring people to North Beach, and we want to continue to bring them there. And they like sitting outside.
Thank you, Rosalino. Gregory, you want to add something? I see your hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Just a point of clarity, in addition to the fixes that Mr. Azzolino just cited, this parklet is not currently within a parking T, so it's misaligned. So the length is going to have to be reduced and the footprint of the structure is going to have to be shifted. So it's not just kind of little finish work like lowering the window. They're going to have to actually shift it or reduce the structure and or reduce it in length. And that's to comply with FSF-MTA's rules to fit within parking Ts. So their increment of measures a parking space, not a business frontage. Some of those parking
Mhm.
spaces, they're on both. But I just want to say that there are some additional consequential changes, or that one specifically.
Okay, thank you. Rosalino?
I do know that, and there are some other little stuff that has to be done. We are not, we never have said we didn't want to do any of those things. I believe some of the improvements that they're asking for are warranted. So, and we're willing to do them. We're willing to take care of all of that. There's some minor things, a trap door that needs to be put in so you can clean underneath, etc. And I believe they're correct in that. We've never been against any of that. The only thing we were trying to do is keep our parklets in front of our business boundaries. And has been the length of it, where Will next door to us, as we agreed to take care of our side. And as I said, Francesco at the beginning was going to be compliant, and things changed on their hand. And it's out of my hands, out of Will's hands. And now we're putting it back into saying some of the drawings that I believe you do have, Gregory, from Elmer. We're willing to comply. We're asking for that window to allow us to comply. And again, if we don't comply, I get it. Take them down and go away. But we're willing to do this as a business to enhance the city. It does bring in more revenue to the city, which is more taxes. And again, it keeps my staff working and their families fed.
Thank you for that. And in the comments, I see that Elmer posted, we provided CA Fish Market a DocuSign in November. And my question is that if you were provided in November and it was not signed, why was there no follow-up?
There was follow-up, constant phone calls. As I said earlier, he went on vacation. Then they were opening the other North Beach restaurant. His partner passed away. Now the kids don't want to be in the business, and there's lawsuits. And there was no return calls. Physically walked down to find them, could not find them. Did what I could on my end of it, and until I finally got to him last week. I sat down a couple of weeks back, right before this denial, where he said, "Oh no, I'm not going to sign it. I can't sign it." And when he explained a couple of things, I said, "I get it now." So here we are, trying to get past all that.
Okay, and did you communicate that to Public Works?
I believe I did, Gregory, yes, I did to you, in a phone call that we had, I mentioned that, the facts that were going on. And that might have been during the denial or when it was going on. The letter might have been already written when we chatted about that. I'm not sure of the timeline on that, but we did have a conversation with that.
And before you speak, Gregory, I noticed that Elmer stated that there was an internal discussion, but there were delays in clarity. And the same was requested of Columbus Cafe in October. Gregory, do you want to?
So the conversation that Mr. Azzolino is referring to occurred on December 13th, and I included that reference in the slides. And on December 13th, I was told that I would have those materials, which was a Friday. I was told on Monday. Additionally, that conversation was a result of us trying to resolve it. No one reached out to us proactively on their own volition saying, hey, this is what's going on. We just want to keep you abreast of some context. It was more of, we don't have what we need. Why is this taking so long? We need to reach out to the applicant. And then we're told, I'll have what you need in 3 days. And that was, I don't know, in excess of 2 months or 3 months ago. And it would have predated any illness or anyone passing away that's been referenced today.
Okay. Okay,
Sir,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Officer Lawrence, excuse me, I'm so sorry to just interrupt. Just wanted to let you know that we're almost 15 minutes to 11, and if you have further questions for Mr. Azzolino, that's great. But if not, he's spoken several times already. So
Okay, thanks for that, Maribel. I'm ready to move on to the next.
thank you.
Okay, and will the Will DeVault for Columbus Cafe?
Hello?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Duvall, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. Hi, guys. Pleased to meet you. So I'm one of the owners of Columbus Cafe. It's myself, and Ben Morrison and Becca Woods. We've owned the place for 5 years now. All of us worked there for about over 10 years before we bought the place. It finally changed hands less than a month before the COVID lockdown. So we were open for a month of regular business, and then we got shut down. The parklet saved us. Without that parklet, the business would have died. It is still keeping us alive, and we need to modify it. That much is clear. I've been keeping up with the redesign submissions between Kelly Albers and Elmer Lynn. Going out and measuring things and trying to see what we need to do to be in compliance. I thought we were showing good faith effort to meet the requirements because of that communication that between Albers and Lynn. Kelly Albers constantly telling Elmer the changes he needed to make, Elmer running those by us. We were trying to coordinate, obviously, between our 3 parklets out there. It looks like the latest design, it's not what we want, but it's what we can get. So, rather than just shutting us down, I can understand an ultimatum, saying, okay, build to these most recent specifications or nothing at all. That's fine. We'll take what we can get. And it is true that we've been allowed to leave the materials out while we pursued the application. And, because Kelly Albers has been sending us these updates, what we need to do, we can't do this piecemeal. We can't fix one thing and then fix the next. We have to fix it all at the same time. So now that we know that it's time to do that, we just need to buckle down. Like Rich said, we're ready to go. We can.
30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can understand an ultimatum, but we have been cooperating. We have been trying to make progress on this, and so we're ready to go. Our businesses depend on this. You know, my apartment is right above Columbus Cafe. Talking about access and everything, you know, I have a lot of skin in this game. All of our businesses depend on these. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
And so, my question to you, Will, is, um, what were some of the issues that you had? You said that you were working with Kelly Embers. What was the last communication that you had with Kelly, and was she aware of any, um, hindrances that you faced? Well,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to unmute him.
You're unmuting the wrong person.
Apologies.
Hi.
Mr. DeWalt, go ahead.
What was the question? Kelly Albers. I haven't been communicating directly with her. I've been chiming in on her conversation with Elmer Lynn. You'll have to talk to him about their timeline of their communication. The last redesign I saw, I don't know if you guys have it. You should. I think Elmer can provide it
oh,
to you.
he did. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if that's what we need to go with, then we will modify the parklet accordingly as soon as, you know, once we get off this call, we'll call the carpenters.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Gregory?
Good morning. I have a pretty detailed chronology of correspondence from Kelly to Columbus. And it looks like 1, 2, 3. There have been at least 4 instances in December 2023, in May 24, in July 24, in August 24, September 24, where our email starts with, "We're following up with you again," which means that our previous correspondence giving a direction was ignored, or we did not receive an adequate response. I do have and this is code from our permit system. I could share with you a screenshot if it's helpful to demonstrate a path of correspondence and engagement in our staff, reiteratively asking them to complete the process and reminding them of previously stated requirements.
Okay, can you provide that?
I
Okay.
just threw that in the chat if you're able to see it.
No, it's not coming up. Okay. And then Will, did you want to speak to that? Oh, thanks, Greg.
Speak to the fact that we have been in communication.
There were in these, he stated that they were asking for information and it wasn't adequate.
I mean, the information that we were providing was, you know, measurements and such. You know, we would send in one design. We meaning Elmer Lynn, on our behalf, would send in one design with modifications, and then Kelly Albers would respond to that. You know, highlight it, say no, this needs to move here. This is in the wrong place, so we'd go and remeasure. You know, the last iteration showed some markings, you know, what needs to move where, and you know, that modification can be implemented. You know, we can go with the last iteration that she gave us. You know, we would like to have more space, but obviously less space is better than none, you know. So we would love to go with the last iteration of the redesign that we were provided.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you so much, Will. So Greg, do you have anything additional to add?
Our objective in this program is to support San Francisco's business, to activate the public right of way, and to provide resources for these businesses. So we'll be here to support them. If you were to deny this application or uphold it, what it means consequentially is we're going to force these businesses to remove those non-compliant structures that hinder public access or first responder access. They want to submit materials. They want to take as long as they want. If they want to make 8 revisions instead of the 2 that typically takes to approve these by a non-credentialed designer, that's totally fine. But I would also say, 6 revisions, 7 revisions. One of the other challenges is that Kelly, who is mentioned on the call, is our main plan checker. And every time someone takes an excessive amount of time or complicates the process to effect or doesn't follow her guidance to the point where it requires reiteration, that's time that our plan checkers could otherwise be serving a business that has a more functional intent or are willing to apply themselves to the process. So these delays, the reason we're denying this application isn't arbitrary. There are concerns about public safety because there's no access there. And then additionally, all the time that we're spending reiterating requirements that have not changed is time that we could otherwise be serving a business that does not even have a pre-existing pandemic parklet, that has no structure and no seating outside, but is willing to expeditiously follow the rules and program protocol. They're kind of being left out to dry to that effect. So if you were to uphold this denial, Sotomare Columbus Cafe would be welcome to regroup and submit a viable application that we would work with them to approve. But it would not come at the expense of other businesses that are willing to apply themselves, and it would not come at the expense of public safety. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and I think that do you have any comments or from the public? Or questions?
We do not have any additional comments or raised hand from the public. Mr. Azzolino does have his hands raised, and just as a reminder, he has spoken and answered your questions. Unless you have questions for him directly, I can allow him to speak.
I don't have any questions for him directly, but I will allow Will to ask a question just to give them a fair amount of time if he has any additional questions. If not, then okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was Mr. Azzolino wanted to make a comment, but Mr. DeVolt does have his hand raised as well. Would you
Yes,
like to allow Mr. DeVolt to speak?
yes. And so, Mr. Azzolino, if you have any additional information, you can provide that to me in writing. But because I want to give a fair amount of time, I'm going to allow Mr. DeVolt to speak.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to say, because it was said a few times about how many revisions we were going through. Like I said, this parklet is critical for our survival, right? So revising something that is so important to our business's survival, just makes sense to me. And the fact that we're the property line argument versus the parking space argument versus, and then we have these 3 businesses together all trying to overlap and work together and meet all these criteria. Like, it's going to merit several revisions. And being that our lives, literally depend on this, multiple revisions doesn't seem like a lot to ask, and it does take a lot of time. And we're not happy with how long, this isn't fun for us either. we're totally ready to just, stop with all the revisions and just go through with the final iteration that Kelly Albers gave us. Because there was no limit in revisions, not that I knew of. I knew there were deadlines, but we have been allowed to keep everything, to keep our parklet up, to keep all the materials in place as they were. But now, obviously, we've been given that ultimatum, and we're ready to proceed. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think that is all the time that we have right now. Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks, Maribel, and thank you to Mr. Azzolino and Mr. DeVolt. If there are no comments from the public, we will convene this session.
Officer Lawrence, I confirm that there are no there are no hands raised at this time from the public.
Okay, thank you so much. And so with that, I will end the session.
I'll go ahead and conclude the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.